Okay, are you completely tired of copying and pasting the exact same lines of code just to get one simple task done? I mean, think about it. If you had to water 10 plants in your house, you wouldn't walk to the sink, fill a tiny cup, water one plant, walk all the way back to the sink, and do that 10 separate times, right? No way. You just fill up a watering can and hit all 10 in one smooth trip. Well, programming works exactly the same way. Welcome to this explainer on mastering JavaScript for loops. Today, we're going to absolutely transform how you write code, turning those painful manual tasks into lightning-fast automated scripts. All right, let's dive right into this. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the dry code principle, then look at the anatomy of a loop, followed by avoiding infinite loops. After that, we'll do a quick while versus for loop showdown, and finally, wrap up with a real-world DOM application. So let's kick things off with Section 1, the dry code principle, which stands for don't repeat yourself. Listen, professional JavaScript developers avoid clunky, repetitive code at literally all costs. And they do it using dry. Like I said, don't repeat yourself. It is basically the golden rule of programming. If you find yourself hitting copy and paste over and over, you're definitely violating it. So what's the ultimate tool to achieve dry code and completely eliminate that repetition? It's the loop. A loop just automatically repeats code for you over and over as long as a certain condition remains true. And man, this perfectly illustrates the difference between scattered manual work and real professional efficiency. Just look at the difference here. On one side, you've got 10 stacked lines of repetitive console.log statements. On the other, a sleek, elegant 3-line loop structure. Now imagine if you needed to print 1,000 lines. Doing that manually would take hours, right? But the loop, it still just takes those exact same 3 lines. That is the absolute power of dry code. Moving right along to Section 2, anatomy of a loop, and what we call the rule of 3. Now, I know loops might look a bit like complex math at first glance, but let's strip away all that jargon. They really just follow a super predictable set of instructions. For absolutely any loop to work, it requires exactly 3 logical steps. Think of it kind of like running laps on a track. Step 1 is the initializer. That's your starting point, like saying, okay, I am currently at lap 0. Step 2 is the condition. That's your finish line, basically saying, I'll keep running as long as my laps are less than 10. And step 3 is the increment. This is how you track your progress. Every single time you cross that start line, you add 1 lap. Without all 3 of these, your computer is totally lost. Let's zero in on that very first step for a second. When we set our starting point, we use what's called an index variable. If you look at professional code, you're almost always going to see developers use the letter I for this. It literally just stands for index. It's nothing fancy, just a standard local variable we use to keep track of exactly where the loop is starting and where it's currently at. Now, if you ever put a loop inside another loop, which definitely happens, developers will usually move on to J or X. But I, well, that's your trusty starting block. All right, let's get into Section 3, avoiding infinite loops. This is where the stakes get a little higher. So remember our running track analogy? What do you think happens if you forget step 3 and just never count your laps? Well, as our source material warns, if you forget to increment, your code is, quote, always going to execute over and over and over. That's going to crash your computer, end quote. Seriously, if your variable never increases toward that exit condition, it's literally like being stuck on a treadmill that has no stop button. It will just eat up all your browser's memory until the whole thing freezes up. So always make sure your variable is actually moving toward the exit. Which brings us to Section 4, while versus for loops. Let's do a little syntax showdown. Okay, so there is a brilliant way to structure your code to prevent those scary infinite loop mistakes. And the visual difference between these two approaches is pretty striking. With a standard while loop, those 3 key components we talked about, they're totally scattered. The variable is declared way up top, the condition is sitting in the brackets, and the increment is buried all the way down at the bottom of the code block. It is so easy to just accidentally delete that increment. But the for loop, it brilliantly packages all 3 components securely inside a single neat line. Let's actually break down this exact line of code. For I equals 0, semicolon I is less than 10, semicolon I plus plus. Boom, right there, all on one single line, we tell the computer, hey, start I at 0. Keep running this loop as long as I is less than 10, and after every single lap, add 1 to I. That's exactly what that plus plus means. It is just so much neater, so much easier on the eyes, and honestly, way safer than that scattered while loop approach. Finally, Section 5, real-world DOM application. This is where we make web pages actually dynamic. Because let's be real, printing numbers in a console is great for practice, but as developers, we want to actually manipulate real web pages. Imagine you're building a site and it has a bunch of links, HTML anchor tags. Maybe you want to dynamically grab every single link to automatically count them, or maybe apply some cool specific styling. To do this, we use document.getElements by tag name to grab all those links and stash them in a variable. Think of it like sending out a little search party that comes back with a numbered list of every single door in a long hallway. Then, we just use our shiny new for loop to walk right down that hallway and interact with each door, one by one. Now here is exactly where we separate the novices from the pros. Hard-coding our condition to say I is less than 6 assumes we know for an absolute fact there are exactly 6 links on the page. But what if a designer comes in and adds 2 more tomorrow? Your code breaks. It completely ignores the new links. Instead, using I is less than links.length automatically counts the links for you in real time. This ensures your loop dynamically updates and stays totally bulletproof, no matter how many links get added or removed down the road. And hey, a quick heads up, logic matters immensely here. Notice the really crucial difference between strictly less than and less than or equal to. Because JavaScript arrays start counting at 0, the very last item's index is actually one number less than the total length. So, using strictly less than, like I is less than links.length, is perfectly designed for this. It stops at exactly the right moment, preventing your code from accidentally reaching into the void for an item that just doesn't exist. It's a tiny detail, but trust me, it saves you from the dreaded off by 1 error. So we've successfully grabbed and modified dynamic links. Pretty cool, right? But that brings us to a much bigger question I want to leave you with today. If we can effortlessly loop through dynamic links on a page, what other HTML elements could you completely automate using a simple for loop? I mean, think about it. Images, paragraphs, user comments, or even items in a shopping cart. For loops are literally your gateway to manipulating massive amounts of data with just 3 lines of code. I highly encourage you to go practice this on some arrays or DOM elements today. Once it finally clicks, the potential is truly limitless. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and happy coding.